So Chris Bowen was on with Kerry Gilbert yesterday and talking about Labor's plans moving forward. I just want to ask you some questions about some of the things he said. Chris says that Labor is backing strong evidence-based approach to net zero emissions by 2050, falling in line with 120 companies around the world. Your government, meanwhile, he says, has no plans to get there.
Well, we've got very clear plans on bringing down emissions. We've met and beaten our Kyoto target, 2020 targets. We're on track to meet and beat our 2030 targets, and we've released our technology investment roadmap, $18 billion of investment behind low emissions technologies in this country, all about making sure we can bring down emissions over the long term without destroying the economy. But what we've seen from Labor is a desperate attempt by Albanese to shore up his leadership. He's changed the jockey, but there's no sign he's changed the horse. And we saw even last week, Chris Bowen, or over the weekend, Chris Bowen refusing to support a gas-fired generator to replace the closure of Liddell in the Hunter Valley. Now, that's crucial for jobs in New South Wales, manufacturing jobs and beyond, and Labor is back where it was. It doesn't have a 2030 target. That's the target that's the most crucial target for the Paris Agreement, because it's what you can be held to account for now, and Labor's refusing to actually even engage on this. We're getting on with the job. That's what Australians want: practical action on the ground, real things that are making a difference. The highest level of household solar in the world in Australia. These are the sorts of practical outcomes that will make the difference, and we're bringing down energy prices. Indeed, we saw just last week that we've had an over 9% reduction in electricity prices across Australia in the last 12 months. So we're getting the outcomes, we're getting the runs on the board, and that's what matters in the end.
Is the reason why you haven't been able to commit to net zero emissions by 2050 because you believe that that can't be achieved?
Well, we're not going to have a target without a very clear plan. I mean, what Labor does, and it did this at the last election, is it set a target, a 45% emission reduction target by 2030, which they're now refusing. They're refusing to commit to a 2030 target, and refused to tell anybody how it was going to be done, what the costs were going to be. And of course, the only answer then was just to impose a carbon tax, a massive cost on Australians. Now, we're just not going down that path. Our approach is technology, not taxation. We continue to look at the impact we can get from technologies like hydrogen, like low emissions steel and aluminium, like soil carbon capture and storage. These are the technologies where we've set clear targets. We know those targets will bring down emissions dramatically, both here and across the world, and can be done so if we reach those targets, those economic targets, can be done so without imposing costs on the economy. So that's where we're going. Labor's refusing to come to the table. Look, I'm hopeful that the change of jockey here may see Labor coming to the table, working with us on practical policies that can strengthen Australian industries, strengthen jobs and investment, and at the same time bring down emissions. But we'll wait and see.
Well, you say that Labor hasn't committed to a midterm target, but you haven't committed to a midterm target either, right?
Well, no, absolutely not. What's required? We've 2030 target, absolutely. 26 to 28% reduction.
No, 2035.
By 2030.
2035.
So the target required in the Paris Agreement is 2030. Now, by 2025, we've got to have a 2035 target. So, you're jumping the gun here. Right now, the target required under the Paris Agreement is 2030. That's the target required. Labor is refusing to put in place a 2030 target. So it tells you that really what they've got in their back pocket is a set of policies like a carbon tax or carbon price in some form, which will impose costs on the Australian economy, on Australian households and businesses, and they don't want to fess up.
Well, getting back to my question about net zero by 2050, in the past you've said it would require a 2030 target of 42%. That's well beyond our forecasts right now. So that's what leads to the question about, do you believe that that's even possible?
Well, a straight line from 2050 to today requires a 2030 target of well over 40%. So, if they're going to, that's what Labor committed to at the last election, and they took that to the Australian people without being clear about how they were going to achieve it. We made the point that these were going to be very serious economic costs on the Australian people. They weren't able to answer those crucial questions. Meanwhile, we're getting on with our 2030 target. We know we can achieve it. We've set targets for 5 core technologies that we know have the potential to reduce or eliminate, largely eliminate emissions in sectors responsible for 90% of not just Australia's emissions, but the world's emissions. We're getting on with the job. Labor are more than welcome to work with us on that. I look forward to having the opportunity to do that with the new Shadow Minister. But the critical thing here is getting on with the job and delivering the results, and we are.
Okay, I noticed you got a tweet from John Kerry again in the early hours of this morning. Have you had more conversations with him?
No, we had that initial conversation. It was very cordial, very positive, very strong focus from both of us on technology and the role that it is playing and will continue to play. We talked about household solar in Australia, the highest level of household solar in the world here in Australia, 1 in 4 houses. We talked about the challenges of bringing those technologies like household solar. Hydrogen we talked about in detail, the target we've set for hydrogen, getting the cost of hydrogen down to below $2 a kilogram. These are the practical actions that John Kerry knows and we know will not just bring down Australian emissions, but global emissions. It was a very strong focus on how to bring down global emissions and a recognition that technology is the pathway. America, of course, is the land of technology. We're working with countries across the world on these technology solutions. We look forward to working with the United States on these, and we're putting together a working group to focus on exactly these issues. And again, we'll continue to focus on those practical on-the-ground actions that are going to make a difference.